Attention sports teams. Let us introduce you to the best fan engagement tool in the game, .vote. By getting a .vote web address for your team, you can allow fans to engage and interact with big-time decisions. In a single click, not only can fans make their opinions heard, but sports teams get a better understanding of their fans' interests. Keep your fans engaged. Simply visit GoDaddy.com today, type in the desired name of your web address, and let the voting begin.
The Jets are a complete mess. What else is new? Why this season is not a case of the same old Jets. It's all right ahead on a fresh edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Hey, welcome into a fresh episode of Gordon Damer on Sports. Lots to get into today. Last episode told you no Jet talk. Today, plenty of Jet talk. Oh, we're going to talk about all the problems of gangrene, and God knows there's a lot of them. We'll discuss things with our buddy Jake Asman, the host of the Jake Asman Show, and really is tuned in as anyone on the Jets as a fan, as a media member, so we'll get his take on everything wrong with their team. I'll touch on the latest story involving my team, the Miami Dolphins, how they just continue to embarrass themselves. And then I got a story from college football that a lot of people are presenting as heartwarming. I'm not so sure. So I'll tell you what it is coming up and see if you agree with me or not. But before we go any further, do me a favor. Say it every episode. Hit that subscribe button. It really does help out the podcast. All right, let's talk about the Jets. You know, you would think an organization that has not made the playoffs in 15 years, what would there be to talk about? I mean, what would you possibly talk about? But you know, with the Jets, amazingly, they find a way. They find a way to inject themselves into the conversation. And let's be honest, usually by being a complete disaster, just hitting a new rock bottom every single time you turn around. And of course, this year was supposed to be different. This year was going to be a fresh start, a new direction, right? New head coach in Aaron Glenn, new general manager in Darren Muji. And finally, a clean slate, right? After the years of dysfunction with Robert Saleh and Zach Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, this year going in, no big expectations, no Super Bowl or bust talk. A year to finally kind of reset things, right? Show some progress, set a foundation. I mean, think about it. What were your expectations for the Jets this season? They're probably not very high, right? 5, 6 wins. Basically, it was more of the line of, give me something to believe in. Show me that the future is brighter than the past. Let me know that the worst of it is over and that the team that I root for, that I spend my Sundays watching, they're done embarrassing themselves. They're done being a punchline for the NFL. Well, so much for that. Because even with the bar set basically on the ground, the Jets have figured out a way basically to trip over it. Because the only thing that Aaron Glenn and the goodwill he had coming in that he could not afford to do this year was to take a step back. That was the one non-negotiable. Nobody is expecting a playoff team or 10 wins or anything like that, but you could not look worse than what the Jets have already looked. And that, unfortunately, is exactly what has happened. And I think that this is the point that people are missing. 6 weeks in, the Jets don't just look bad. They look unprepared. Sunday in London, that might have been the worst coaching performance anyone has seen in years, maybe since the Jets last made the playoffs 15 years ago. That game, they did everything they could do to lose it, and that starts with Aaron Glenn. His decisions, his coaching decisions led to them losing that game. The fact that he had no faith in his quarterback at the end of the half and then came out in the second half and continued to play the same quarterback in a winnable game. So the question everyone's asking is, does Aaron Glenn keep his job after this year, right? Is he one and done? And everybody will point out, he deserves more time. Also that, Woody Johnson's not going to want to fire Aaron Glenn after one season. Well, that the fact that Woody Johnson feels a specific way means that the opposite is probably the right decision, right? The fact that he feels, oh no, Aaron Glenn, we got to keep Aaron Glenn around, that probably tells you do the opposite. And look, if you ask me this, if Aaron Glenn, let's present this as the possibility, through 6 games, if Aaron Glenn had gotten the job on a temporary basis, if this was a tryout, how would you say he's doing? Because Sunday alone, if this were a tryout, that would have ended the tryout. He looked as lost as any head coach I can remember. I mean, he ran out the clock near midfield at the end of the half because he had zero faith in his quarterback, and then turned around and played the same quarterback in the second half of a winnable game when you have no wins. He's calling timeouts before. I mean, look, we all expected there to be some learning on the job. That's not learning on the job. That's not knowing what you're doing. And often you'll hear athletes when they break into a league saying, oh, I needed the game to slow down. It looks like the game has not slowed down for Aaron Glenn. It's one thing to be inexperienced. It's another thing to look overwhelmed. And right now he looks overwhelmed. He does not look the part of an NFL head coach. And, if it were only some bad decisions, that would be one thing. Honestly, I think the worst part has been his performances in press conferences, because you come away from those press conferences thinking, this is the guy who's in charge? The fact that he bristled at that question about playing Justin Fields in the future when he just told you he had no faith in the quarterback in the present. That to me is absolutely mind-boggling. And look, I'm not going to tell you that what he says after games really matters. What matters is winning games. That's the only thing that matters, right? Go win games, and then you can say whatever you want. But what he says after the games, that was supposed to be the easiest part of the job. For a longtime assistant, a longtime NFL player, and a guy who played in New York, that was one of the reasons that got him hired. This was supposed to be one of his strengths. The former player who knew how to handle the New York media, who could communicate, could, kind of sell a vision. Instead, it has been the opposite. Every answer basically makes you feel less confident in his leadership, certainly not more. So to get back to the hypothetical, like if this were a tryout, this has been a massive fail of one of the core competencies of the gig. Being a head coach in New York, it's not just about drawing up a game plan. It's about projecting the image of being in control and being confident. And right now, it's hard to say that Aaron Glenn is doing that. And if you can't project that, like what chance do you have? Because it's one thing to lose the media or lose the fans. It's another thing to lose games. Then you got the players, because that's the next level of this disaster. You saw Garrett Wilson get ticked off at the end of the half. Wilson, Breece Hall, Sauce Gardner, Quinnen Williams, these guys have lived through this type of stuff for years now, years of losing, years of dysfunction. And this is why I think this is a different situation than other coaching jobs. These guys probably thought to themselves, all right, it's been bad, but now we finally got a fresh start and things are going to get turned around. And yet it's gotten worse. They're a big part. I mean, this is a mess. It's more embarrassing, not less. And at some point as a player, you'd have to think, you look around and realize, man, my career is flashing before my eyes. This organization has been doing this for 15 years. I'm probably not going to have a 15-year career. And how many years am I going to have before things get turned around? Is it going to get turned around? Because it's not. Has it gotten turned around yet? Doesn't even seem like the turnaround has started. So the danger is not just losing games, it's losing the belief of the players. And once that happens, those players start tuning out the voice of the head coach. And to think that that's even being brought up in conversation 6 games in tells you how bad it's been. You can kind of see it in the body language. And I think the way that the team carries itself. Now, I'm not in the locker room. I'm not talking to the players, but I don't think you need to, right? Like, put yourself in the player's shoes. Aaron Glenn is not just coaching a bad team. He's coaching a bad team that is getting worse. And he's a big reason why it's getting worse. So you can survive a bad team when you're the first-year coach of a bad organization. You can't survive getting worse. This was supposed to be a fresh start. And another big thing going against Aaron Glenn is the quarterback situation. And why the quarterback play is such a bad sign for this regime. This was the front office's big swing this offseason. Hey, let's bring in Justin Fields. We don't have a quarterback. We're not going to draft one. We'll bring in Fields, change the scenery, and we're going to unlock something. And it made some sense, right? It was low risk. It was high reward. Let's see. Here's the issue. Did they have a plan to get the best version of him? Like, what is the actual structure to make that work? Because right now, it doesn't seem like the coaching staff has ever seen Justin Fields play. He's not a pocket passer. He's never been. He's never going to be. That's not who he is. His best football, it seems, look, I don't know if this is going to turn things around either, but his best football comes when you get him on the move, outside the pocket, uses his athleticism some, right? Create. And yet, it seems like the only plan that the Jets have put towards Justin Fields is like, don't turn the ball over. There's been no real rollouts. There's no design runs. There's no dump offs to the back. The Broncos were rushing. Their pass rush was salivating, thinking about getting another sack, and they didn't throw any screen passes. Like, what are we doing? So that's on Aaron Glenn, but it's also on the offensive coordinator, Tanner Engstrand, who has looked, yikes. It looks like he is still calling plays for a pocket passer like he had in Detroit in Jared Goff. That's not who you got here. You got a completely different quarterback. So is there a plan? Did you think that just by getting Justin Fields, he would be better in your system? I understand the reason to take a shot, but when you're 6 games in, and he hasn't even played all the games because of the concussion, and people think Tyrod Taylor is the better option, and he kind of is if you're looking to win some games, that's a bad sign for Justin Fields, but it's a really bad sign for how you've handled Justin Fields. What have you put in place? I think it's still debatable of whether or not you could put a system in place to get, I'll say this, you can certainly get more out of Justin Fields than the Jets are getting. The Jets are getting the worst version of Justin Fields, and I think that largely, a lot of that goes to coaching. All right, let's talk about the other angle of this, because this gets brought up all the time by Jet fans, and that would be ownership. Woody Johnson has owned the team for a long time, and let's be honest, right now, of all the New York sports teams' owners, he has the title, not of the people's champ, but of the worst owner in New York sports. And it's kind of hard to debate that, right? You have not made the playoffs in a decade and a half. There's constant turnover. There's a constant embarrassment. He leaves for years to be the ambassador overseas. I mean, that's not exactly the resume of a guy who's, hell-bent on winning, right? It almost seems like a guy who really likes a toy but doesn't really know how to use the toy. And it shows. I think publicly, you see the dysfunction of the Jets, but there has to be way more dysfunction going on behind the scenes. Like the stuff you see is the tip of the iceberg. And behind the scenes, at least with the Jets, it feels like Game of Thrones. So I don't think it's an accident that obviously at the end of the day, ownership does have to take ownership of the failures, and Aaron Glenn being here, that's a big one on the owner, and why I think right now it feels so hopeless, because it's not just the losing, it's the fact that, again, the trend line is worse. 0-6 to start a season. It doesn't get much worse than that. And it would be one thing, if the Jets were getting blown out of all these games, they've been in a lot of these games. Should have won the Steeler game. Should have won the Miami game. Should have won on Sunday. So in terms of the worst owner in sports thing about Woody Johnson, I would just say caution for Jet fans in that it was not that long ago a different owner had that title, and that would be James Dolan. James Dolan, for basically 2 decades, can't win with them. Guy is completely hopeless. It's never going to turn around with the Knicks. The Knicks will never be good with James Dolan as the owner. He'll always stick his nose in where it doesn't belong. And that was the way it was until it wasn't, until he hired Leon Rose and they finally got things turned around. And, the guy who had the title of worst owner in New York sports before that was probably George Steinbrenner. Remember, when he got suspended, the fan base cheered. Yankee Stadium cheered because he had run the team into the ground. Now, look, those guys have had more success. Basically, everybody in New York sports has had more success than Woody Johnson. He had some success very early on and has not had a success for a while. So the only reason why I would say he's not the worst owner in sports or the worst owner in New York sports is because he has had success. It is possible for the Jets to be a good team while Woody Johnson is the owner. But right now, it doesn't feel that way. So what happens now in terms of the head coach? The next 3 weeks to me are absolutely critical. Panthers, Bengals, Browns. If think about where we've gone from week 1 to week 6. If you get to week 10 and they have not won a game against some backup quarterbacks, not good the Browns, they're a mess. The Bengals have a backup quarterback. You have to be able to find a way to win some games. Because if you can't, if it just keeps getting worse, well, then all bets are off. And I get it. Aaron Glenn probably has a long-term deal, but he cannot afford for things to look any worse. He's already looked bad. The team has looked bad. But this is the next step, because at some point it becomes no longer about now, and it becomes about the future. Because after this season, the Jets are going to have a very high draft pick, right? Do you trust the people that are doing things right now? The people who brought you Justin Fields and didn't put a plan in place to get the best out of Justin Fields? Would you trust them with a quarterback at the top of the draft? If you're a quarterback entering the draft, are you trying to find an extra year of eligibility just so you don't have to go to the New York Jets and get ruined for 3 or 4 years? It's a very tricky situation, and even though he is in the first year and you do have to give him some time, I think it's a unique situation when it comes to the Jets. Now, I would say if you're going to fire Aaron Glenn, there is one caveat. You have to have a replacement who's not a first-time head coach. Like, the way you get out of this, I think, is clearly the Jets don't know how to get out of this. They need somebody to come in here and show them how to get out of it. And I think the best way you do that is having someone who has gotten out of it someplace else. Now, the last time the Jets got out of something similar, they had Bill Parcells. Bill Parcells is not walking through that door. And you have to find, is there another, that person has to exist. I don't think it's John Gruden. John Harbaugh, there's been some talk, maybe he gets fired by Baltimore. Does he want the Jets job? The one guy, and it's been mentioned before, it's not sexy, is Mike McCarthy. That's not going to excite the fan base. But you need somebody who at least has some track record of success. And that's the trap I think that the Jets fall into. You can't fire the coach if you're Woody Johnson without having an acceptable replacement of a track record. And I think one of the reasons why the Jets have continued this trend is because they keep hiring basically the same guys who have no options anywhere else, guys who have never coached before, and now have a chance at life-changing money as a head coach for one of these few jobs that are available. So I think that you cannot rule out the possibility that the Jets are going to have to turn the page on Aaron Glenn after this season if business don't pick up very quickly, because, again, this was supposed to be something new. And yet, instead of being the same old Jets, the Jets are a brand new version that's even worse. And with a head coach who looks like he does not belong being a head coach. He looks like an interim right now. He looks like he was not aware of it's like he lied on his resume to get the job, and now he's got to go do the job. It's not been good. And this team has looked uninspired, and it's only going to get worse. You've had winnable games, and you're 0-6. Aaron Glenn walked in with plenty of optimism from the fan base when he was hired, but that optimism, man, that has worn out very fast. So the first step is to get out of the hole is to stop digging. And that would be to win some games. You got Carolina. That is a winnable game. I don't think Carolina has won a road game so far this year. You got to be able to beat Carolina. You have to be able to win some games. That's the only thing that gets this thing turned around. There's no savior. Nobody's coming to save you. And right now, with the Jets looking like they are, the only thing that can possibly give the fan base something is to show that the worst of it is over. Now, we thought the worst of it is over before Aaron Glenn got here. But if he can at least show at this point, you know what? Those first 6 games were really bad. But the low point was that game in London against Denver. And from that point on, the Jets beat Carolina. They beat a couple of teams. And at least now you can delude yourself. The fans want to delude themselves. They want to delude themselves into thinking things aren't as bad as they seem. They don't want to be negative. They don't want to be negative all the time. But that's all they've gotten back. You'd have to be delusional to not be negative based on the last 15 years and the first 6 games of this year. So for Aaron Glenn, I don't think you can look at this situation as just the typical first-year coach taking over a bad organization. There's some things working against him. And maybe the biggest thing working against Aaron Glenn right now is Aaron Glenn. All right, we're joined now by Jake Asman, who is all about the New York Jets. You see the Jake Asman show there. You can hear him on Sirius, ESPN Radio. He's got his pod on YouTube and everything else. Jake, thanks for giving us a few minutes. Outside of the Jets, how are we doing?
Well, the Yankees also are eliminated, Gordon. So I know we share that that passion, right? So not great. I guess thank God for the Knicks season starting up soon. I mean, they might be the only hope for my fandom because the Islanders are off to a terrible start. So I'm hanging in. You know, life's good besides the teams I root for, I suppose.
Well, I wanted to talk about the Jets today with everything that's going on with them. It feels like it just keeps getting worse week in, week out. Where are you at in your Jets fandom right now in terms of optimism to negativity?
So I'm normally a very optimistic guy by nature. At least I used to be. Even with the Jets the last couple of years, I still had high hopes. I still tried to see, how they could be a really good team with Rodgers coming back, for example, a year ago, and liked a lot of the talent that they had. But I'm about as low as I've ever been as a Jet fan, especially after that game in London on Sunday where they lost the game because of incompetence from their head coach. And for me to be this down about any Jet coach, but a first-year coach, and really just a brand new regime this quickly, I've never experienced that as a Jet fan. So this is probably about as low as I've ever been as far as, positive or negative. I mean, I'm as negative as I've ever been talking about this team, and I do it every day for my full-time job, so it has not been easy.
Going into the year, now I'm not a Jet fan. I would be defined by being a Jet hater. I'm a Dolphin fan, so it's only fair. But I was trying to be fair, and I said my expectations for this year were two things. A, let me see Justin Fields every single week, and let's see if, for once and for all, let's settle the question of whether or not this guy can be a franchise quarterback. And then the second thing was for Aaron Glenn, just act like you know what you're doing, right? Just act like, fake it until you make it, even if you're learning on the job. What were your expectations going into this season, and where are you at now with those expectations?
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Gordon, because going into the year, I don't think there were most fans expecting a playoff season, right? We kind of understood that it was going to be unlikely unless Justin Fields had this breakout Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield-esque, career renaissance. I think we all knew Fields was a lottery ticket. I understood their thought process. 26 years old. He is talented. We just mentioned two quarterbacks that in similar situations were able to turn it around. So I totally understood that. But I wanted to see a team that would, one, be competitive, be in games, and outside of a couple, they really haven't been. Even the game against the Bucs that I unfortunately flew down to Tampa to watch in person and melted at, that was a fake comeback. It took 14 Bucs penalties. Todd Bowles taking his foot off the gas. The Jets get this miracle play from Will McDonald. Then the defense immediately blows it, right? They have a 9-point lead even in week one where they played a pretty decent game. Definitely on offense. They played really well. And they still blow the game late against Aaron Rodgers. And then you just go through all the other games, the garbage time scoring, making it look a lot better than it actually was. And just how awful, of course, that game in London was. I wanted to see a team that would get better throughout the year, would be well coached, would handle situations properly. And I've seen none of that from Aaron Glenn. There's not one thing that the Jets do better right now than they did a year ago or the prior year. They still heavily penalized. They still beat themselves. Their head coach is maybe even worse in clock management and end of half scenarios than Saleh and
Think about how much time we've spent talking about that in the past, right? And it's still an issue.
It's just you try and find something. The defense finally played a good game, but for a defense that had 8 of its 11 starters back going into the year, we thought the defense would be able to keep them in games, and that would be their path to hanging around, and the offense would probably struggle as they're learning a new system. So it's just all been bad. I really, people say I'm too negative now, but these are the same people who said I was a Jet homer a year ago. So I think I'm just a realist. I think I'm just looking at this team trying to find something, and it's very hard to do that.
Yeah, I always say, because people say the same thing about me with being a Dolphin hater, because, I mean, what is there to like exactly? I base my opinions on the evidence. And as the evidence changes, I will change my opinion. I don't know how you couldn't be. I mean, if you were not negative at this point, especially when it comes to the head coach, I would just have to assume you're not watching the games, because you're right. That performance on Sunday, it's not. Look, I expected him to kind of be learning on the job to a certain degree, but to look as lost as he has looked, deer in the headlights at the end of the half, the way they handled the end of the game, it's very hard for me to envision that a guy who looks this lost right now is suddenly going to turn it around when the talent hopefully improves, because that's a huge jump to make. Where are you on the head coach, considering this is his first year?
Yeah, very concerned. I understand there's going to be some learning on the job. Like in week one, for example, there were a couple things he did where he burned the timeout before a 2-point conversion, or hey, maybe they could have just taken a delay of game penalty instead of burning a timeout. Like there are like some things that like you could live with. I think the fact that it was so bad on Sunday, and that was not like not all losses are the same, right? That was a nationally televised game. The entire country's watching it. It's an international embarrassment for the Jets now after what happened in London, right? Like everyone saw that. And then to me, what was almost even worse was his answers after the game, not
Oh,
being able to
after the
explain.
game, he is completely lost. I mean, it's
Terrible.
amazing.
I mean, he's asked a totally reasonable question about, hey, is Justin Fields going to be your quarterback for this upcoming week? And he completely tries to like go after Brian Costello from the New York Post, who asked a totally reasonable question. And in that answer, to me, what was so alarming about it, beyond him just getting mad at a totally reasonable question, he's so defiant about it, Gordon, that it's like he didn't even consider in that game to bench Fields at any point. And I'm like, what? Like, how could you be an NFL coach? And Aaron Glenn said this a lot over the summer, right? He's puffing his chest that he's not just a defensive coach. He's a football coach. He coaches the whole team. He's not calling the defense. He's not the play caller on offense. So his job is to manage the clock, manage the timeouts, manage the end of the half, and have a feel for his team. And for him to have no feel that Fields needed to go on the bench and you go to Tyrod Taylor for a drive and you probably win, that really concerns me. And then even this week, he's referencing the media and, oh, you guys are going to say this if Fields does that. And it's like he's got rabbit ears. So that's really concerning to me that a guy who played in this market, has been mentored by Parcells and Sean Payton and Dan Campbell, like the fact that he seems to care so much about what the media and then the fans are thinking, that also concerns me beyond just how inept he has looked so far through these first 6 weeks.
Yeah, and that was supposed to be one of his benefits, right? That he's played here, he's been part of the turnaround. He's going to know what the expectations are coming in. And in that press conference after the game, he basically admitted he had no faith in Justin Fields by the way they handled the end of the first half, but yet he's still bristling at a question of whether or not you thought about basically, pulling him in that game or at least moving off of him in the future. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And look, you expect him to be kind of learning on the job some, but when you're the overseer of the team as the head coach, having a feel for the situation in that moment, you would think is one. I mean, we kill Aaron Boone about that because, it just doesn't seem to have any feel, especially when we get into these playoff games. And for a head coach, yeah, I'd like them to have a great scheme or to be able to get the most out of the talent. But I think that the first basic skill is to have a feel for the game, especially as a former player and now a longtime coach.
Totally agree. And what really was alarming beyond like everything we've talked about so far, how about the fact at the end of this game on Sunday, it's 4th and 8, and Aaron Glenn says after the game, hey, did you consider sending Nick Folk out there just to try the long field goal? He's like, well, it would have been what, like 65 or 68 yards? Aaron, it would have been 61 yards, and Nick Folk hit from 58 against Gordon, your team, on Monday Night Football a couple weeks ago. I mean, let's play the percentages here. Well, it's probably unlikely Nick Folk does hit from 61 or 62. There's a better chance of that than Justin Fields completing a 4th and 8, given the fact he couldn't complete a forward pass to save his life on Sunday. So, like, him not even having the proper yardage for what the field goal would have been, that's his job. That is the job of the head coach to know that. So it's really bad. And once again, not all losses are the same. After a game like that, you start to have the conversation, well, how bad is this going to get? And if it is so bad where they're picking number 1 overall, they're finishing with 2 wins or less, does he survive that? Like, you never want a one and done a coach, but I think that loss was so bad. If it ever happens again, if something like that continues or comes close to what we just saw, I don't know how you could, as a Jet fan, have any faith in this regime picking the right quarterback, developing that quarterback. Like, you almost have to save yourself from what is likely going to be ruining another quarterback if you allow this guy to go through with this regime. Like, that's how bad that game was on Sunday. That's how soured I am on this entire regime after that.
Well, and also, their big decision this offseason was Justin Fields. That was like the big move that they made. And
$30 million guaranteed.
Right. I understood it at the time. Not a great quarterback market. I did, and I still do think you had to move off Aaron Rodgers. I didn't think that was the right. I'm not going to go back with revisionist history at this point. But they brought in Fields, and they've not coached to his strengths at all. They don't get him out of the pocket. They're trying to like make him a pocket passer. And it's clear that they have made the point to him, don't turn the football over, because he's terrified of making a mistake and is basically playing scared. So in terms of the judgment moving forward, it's based on the judgment of the past. And that's the big decision that they made. And this is not just on Aaron Glenn. This is on Darren Muji. This is on the offensive coordinator as well. It's this entire regime that one decision, it does not give you, beyond wins and losses, does not give you a lot of confidence in their decision-making moving forward.
Yeah, it's a great point. And Justin Fields even said yesterday that, his legs since the Miami game have not been 100%. He's dealing with a leg contusion. So I'm thinking to myself, wait a second. Well, if Justin Fields does not have the ability to run, he's as bad as Zach Wilson, if not worse, in the pocket. Like, the whole point of having Fields is that the threat of him being able to take off and run allows things to be opened up in your passing game. We saw that week 1 to perfection when he had arguably the best game of his life against Pittsburgh. So that's even more evidence to me that the head coach really has no feel, no clue, because if you knew Fields was compromised and you wouldn't be able to call those RPOs and design quarterback keepers and set up what you want to be as an offense, then how at any point do you not go to Tyrod Taylor just to go out there and give you a spark? You needed one scoring drive and you win that game. The special teams was excellent. The defense finally forced a turnover and played outstanding. He let the team down. He let the other 52 players and all the coaches down by not making a change. And once again, it goes back to what you were just saying, right? We know what Fields is able to do and what he can't do. And he didn't have the superpower available to him, and they still left him out there for that entire game. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, and it's one thing to lose the fan base or the media. How close do you think that Aaron Glenn is to losing the locker room? Because I get it. He just got here. It's just 6 games. But these guys, Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, they've been here for this, and there has to be a cumulative effect to where, okay, we got a fresh start, we got a new coach, it's going to turn around. And now to be 0-6, and it feels like the low point of all the low points. How close do you think it is to becoming a crisis point for the locker room?
I think a lot of it could come down to, what happens early in this game Sunday against Carolina. Like, I think if Justin Fields goes out there and he still is really struggling, similar to what we just saw, I think if he doesn't go to Tyrod at that point, then all bets are off whether or not people are still bought in. I'm curious to see how the defense responds. Was that just an outlier performance, or did Steve Wilkes and Glenn finally get through to that unit, and we're going to start to see the Jets defense play a lot better? They do have talent on that side of the ball, so they should never have been as bad as they were the first 5 games. I think we learn a lot Sunday. They got to start winning games. I understand Glenn's trying to implement his culture and all that, but that's all nonsense if you don't have anything to show for it. You have to win games. No one's expecting this team to win 10 games this year, or as Glenn goes, oh, well, everyone wants to win the Super Bowl. It's like, no Jet fan thought you guys were going to win the Super Bowl. We knew your win total was 6.5. Nobody thought you'd be the only team in the NFL without a win, 6 weeks into the season. Like, he's now kind of moving the goalpost a little bit too. And he's quoting Salah with the instant coffee line. He's talking about how big ships take a while to turn. And it feels incredibly disingenuous. So I think he could lose the locker room if he doesn't act with his quarterback in this game on Sunday, because it could get really ugly again.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, you're right. Nobody expected them to win a whole bunch of games, but at least a couple of these games they've lost because of coaching. I mean, the first game of the season, that Steeler game, they should have won that game.
Yeah, played them.
Miami game, clearly they should have won. And then Sunday, if you're sitting here at 2-4, it has a completely different feel than 0-6. At least, fans, they want to believe. They want to be able to delude themselves. They don't want to sit there 6 games into a season and think all is lost. And fans want to believe, but you have to give them something to believe in. And at least so far, the Aaron Glenn move. I don't know, what the expectations were for like the most pessimistic fan, but at least so far they've kind of played out that way.
Yeah, I totally agree. And look, you're right. If they were 2-4 right now, there'd be a totally different feel for this team. It'd be like, well, that's kind of where probably many of us thought they were going to be. They've been in games and they've had a chance to win, but it's just, it really is crazy because once again, they're now 0-6. They got 3 games coming up here against teams that should be in their weight class. Carolina, Cincinnati in their building, then the bye week, and then followed by the Browns after the bye. I mean, how ugly is this going to get? Like, are they going to be 0-8 at the bye week? That can't be acceptable. And I understand Garrett Wilson's out, but you know what? Tough luck. 1, you went into the year without any depth at receiver. That was your choosing, Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji. And 2, teams all have injuries across the league, and you got to find a way to overcome it. So I just, at this point, I think the Jet fan is wondering how much worse is this going to get? Because I don't think, Gordon, we'd necessarily hit rock bottom yet. I think if this continues, there's going to be a real tough, uncomfortable conversation about, can you move forward with this regime? And I get it. It's only been 1 year. But if you have the number 1 pick in the draft, that is something you got to strongly consider, because we've seen Jet history, how often they've taken a quarterback and have set up that quarterback to fail.
Do you think it's possible Aaron Glenn could get fired after this season? Because I don't. I think that Woody is not the type of owner who's going to pay another coach to go away. Do you think that there's any way that he gets fired this year?
So people bring up Woody not wanting to pay someone. I think it's more about Woody's ego in this scenario, Gordon. What I mean by that is this. The last time Woody Johnson hired a coach and GM before this regime was 2015 with Bowles and McCagnon. He didn't hire Joe Douglas. He didn't hire Robert Saleh. His brother oversaw all that, and he inherited those guys. So he would tell people, I heard from a lot of folks behind the scenes, those aren't my guys. Like, I want to get my people in here. So Glenn was his guy. Like, that was his hire, and obviously Muji was vouched for by Aaron Glenn. So does Woody want to admit a mistake after 1 year? I do wonder, though. I mean, if we're talking about a 2-15 football team, would that change his opinion? Would that completely sour him? He's got more money than anyone. He's a billionaire. He just bought a soccer team across the pond. I think it was Crystal Palace was the name of the team. So I don't always think it's about the money with Woody. I think it's the ego, right? These are his guys. Does he want to admit a year in he made a mistake? He might have to if he's as disgusted as we all are. And he's a lot older than he's been. And we have seen more coaches in recent years be one and done. So I'm not rooting for it. I hope Glenn could turn it around. There's still 11 games to go to show us something, but it's not looking good right now. The fact that it's a legitimate conversation on October 16th, I think, is definitely a major concern of every Jet fan.
Do you think you hear from Jet fans, we go to, the typical list of culprits, the quarterback, the coach, the GM, and eventually you get to the owner. I know that a lot of Jet fans think that Woody Johnson's the worst owner in the NFL, the worst owner in all of sports. Do you think he's the main culprit for why this team is where they're at? Not just now, but over the last 15 years?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it all starts with him, right? So I understand why people say that. I always use the Knicks as an example here because as a diehard Knicks fans despise James Dolan. He was the worst owner in sports during that run where the Knicks couldn't get out of their own way. And what changed? Well, he finally hired Leon Rose and Tom Thibodeau. You hire the right people, you stayed out of the way, and they turned the Knicks around to what they are today. I feel like with Woody, he just continues to get these hires wrong. And if Glenn and Muji don't work out, is that Woody's fault? Well, I mean, he hired them, sure, but he's not the one that is, making these decisions. He's letting them do their job. So it's always tricky for me because, he's not selling the team. So until they win, sure, the last 15 years, longest playoff drought in sports, haven't had a winning season in a decade. Yeah, he's the worst owner in sports. I have no problem saying that, but he's not selling. And ultimately, I think he can only hire the right people and hope that he actually hired those correct people. I don't know what else he could really do other than let Glenn and Muji do it their way, stay out of their way, and then if it's as bad as it looks like it's headed, you have to at least have that conversation and evaluate it at the end of the year.
Yeah, it's funny. You're not old enough to know this, but Dolan is the one where for the 15 years, he's the worst owner in sports. If you have to go back to the conversation of worst owners before that, it might have been George Steinbrenner, right? Like Steinbrenner run the Yankees into the ground. He gets suspended. Everybody's cheering. So it's an easy thing to say, hey, the owner is the real culprit. I just think for Woody, he's not been able to hire the right people. Now, I guess part of I don't think that he's an owner that lives and dies with the team, right? To go off to London and be the ambassador and leave it in your, I don't think that. But I don't know that there's that many owners in the NFL who are living and dying with the team. So at the end of the day, you're right. It has to be him as the culprit for why they have not been able to get this turned around. But I don't look at him as being an owner who's had no success because when he first came on board, they did have some success. So I don't know how you fix that. It doesn't seem like an easy fix, but I'm not one to kind of bash Woody and think that, he's the main culprit and it's never going to change until he sells the team or doesn't own the team anymore.
I mean, he spends a lot of money. He's never really been cheap on paying players. They have a world. I mean, you've been to their facility. They have a world-class facility in Florham Park. Like he's put his money where his mouth is in a lot of these key areas, right? So it's tough. And to your point, he bought the team in 2000, from 2000 to 2016 when he went over to London, right? The Jets never had two straight losing seasons. They made the playoffs. Like when I was growing up as a Jet fan, now it coincided with, the greatest dynasty ever with the Patriots. But when I was growing up as a kid, the Jets were going to the playoffs 6 times in the 2000s, 01, 02, 04, 06. They had a winning record in 08. They obviously went to the championship game with Rex and Sanchez in 09 and 10. Like they weren't a Super Bowl team, but they were relevant. They weren't a disaster like they are now. And Woody was the owner then. So I think it just goes back to what we were saying, Gordon. You got to have the right GM and right coach in place. And that's really what the job of the owner is. Hire the right people, give them the resources to do their jobs, and ultimately stay out of the way. And unfortunately, I think when you go through the history of the Jets the last 15 years, they've had awful coaches, awful executives. And I mean, the proof is what you see on the field every Sunday.
Yeah, I go back to do the deep dive. I go back to the Idzik years. It feels like that is really where it kind of turned for the worse. Did not get much out of the draft those years that he was here. He was such a disaster that really, I feel like, kind of started this whole ball rolling downhill. Do you have like an ultimate culprit that you have here for why they've not been in the playoffs here for 15 years now?
There's a couple breaking points you could point to. I think even before Izek, though, the worst decision I think in hindsight Woody made, and I believe if he could do it over again, he would have done this differently. When he fired Mike Tannenbaum but kept Rex, that set the stage for Izek to come in. You had Izek who wasn't on the same timeline as Rex, who needed to win to save his job. Izek didn't get to pick his coach, so you're not even getting the best GM candidate because what GM would take a job where they don't get to pick the head coach they're working with? So they never saw eye to eye. Rex actually was somehow able to get 8 wins in 2013 out of a very mediocre to below average roster, saved his job for a year. They come back in 2014, and well, here's Rex Ryan, 4-12 with a bad team. Him and Izek both get fired. Then you're starting over, and yes, Todd Bowles did have that 10-win season with Fitzpatrick in year one, but he wasn't great with the Jets, and they also gave him very little talent. Go back, as bad as Izek's drafts were, and they were awful, Mike McCagden's drafts were almost as bad a lot of years too. So I think that's where it kind of starts, right? Not having Rex and Tannenbaum on the same page kind of started the spiral of just kind of chasing your tail where you're trying to get the organization aligned. And they finally had that with Saleh and Douglas. But, I mean, Joe Douglas was in his 6th year when he finally got fired. He had plenty of time. He didn't win enough games. They missed on Zach Wilson. And ultimately, when you miss on coach, quarterback, it sets you back. And that's where the Jets are today.
All right, they're 0-6 going up against Carolina this week. What's the big picture for Jake Asman as what are you hoping to get out of this season?
I mean, I want to feel like we have a real coach that you can have some confidence in going forward. I know you're a Dolphins fan. Brian Flores, it got off to that terrible start. Was he 0-7, 0-8, and then they started to play a lot better. Maybe you felt a lot better going into the offseason about your team. I want something. I'm not someone in October who's rooting for losses and rooting for the tank, but I will say this. We get to a point where they're 1-11 with 4 games to go. Yeah, I'm not rooting for wins at that point. No point. Like the win total to me could be misleading. Like the wins got to happen now. They got to happen over the next 3 games when you're playing Carolina, Cincinnati, Cleveland, teams in your weight class that you should be able to beat. So I want to see some real improvement. I want to see the coach never have a game like what we just saw on Sunday against Denver. And just something to make you feel like if they are going to keep these guys, because Woody doesn't want to pull the plug after a year with his coach, that there's reasons to think they won't screw up whoever they're going to end up taking in the draft, likely 1st, 2nd, 3rd overall at the quarterback spot.
Jake, time is a flat circle. As a Dolphin fan, I know what you're going through. As a Jet fan, you know what I'm going through. The Bills are still good. The Patriots are on their way back, and the Dolphins and Jets are just battling to see who comes in last place. It's amazing.
It never ends. It's amazing because the Jets have the longest playoff drought in sports, and what Miami has the longest drought without winning a playoff game. So it's unbelievable how bad these franchises have been, and I don't know when it ggets better too. That's what's so scary. Like usually I would have something to point to, but this is about as low as I've been as a Jet fan.
Well, look, Jake, hang in there. I know there's no advice that I can give, and that's the worst part of a bad football season because it's not like baseball where you can make a trade or you fire the manager and they get a little bit of a spark. Football, you just have to sit and stew in it. You know what I mean? You just have to sit there every single week and watch the same crap every single week. So I understand what you're going through. I know that's not going to make you feel any better, but thanks for giving us a couple of minutes to talk about the Jets today, man.
Anytime, Gordon. Appreciate you having me.
As much as I love talking about the dysfunction of the Jets, I hate talking about the dysfunction of my team, and that, of course, would be the Miami Dolphins, who are only slightly better, and that's saying something. So Mike McDaniel, the head coach, it's been all the talk this year. Mike McDaniel's going to get fired. He's a very easy target. He doesn't look like a head coach. He's a different kind of guy. He's a nerdy kind of guy. He's not a former player. So he'll take all the slings and arrows. It's almost like for him, you ever see a grave where somebody's bought the grave, but they're not dead yet, right? Like that's kind of like the name is there, but they haven't been able to put it in the date. That's Mike McDaniel. He's toast. He's going to get fired. But the funny thing is, there's been talk that he get fired, but the GM stays. I think I've said this before in the pod. Keeping the general manager while firing the head coach, that would be like changing your shirt after you crapped your pants. It makes absolutely no sense. It does not fix the real issue. But then, of course, you have the quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa. The Dolphins are 1-5 of the season. And the other day, he gets asked about how you avoid feeling sorry for yourself. And then he brings up that the players' leadership needs to set expectations and said that guys are not showing up to or showing up late to players-only meetings. Some guys aren't showing up at all. And he's wondering if they need to make those things mandatory. Now, hold on. Does Tua realize what he's saying here? He is criticizing the leadership of the team. He's supposed to be the leader of the team. This is like basic stuff. You don't air this out to the media about what's going on in the locker room. That's not what a real leader does. And by doing this, by saying this publicly, he's not really exposing his teammates as much. He's throwing his head coach under the bus. And look, the coach is already under the bus. Mike McDaniel is already under the bus. And Mike McDaniel, for all the criticism, he's the only reason why Tua has any success at all. He came in and designed an offense to fit him. And this is how he repays him? So when McDaniel, whoever, when he eventually gets fired, what coach do you think is going to want to take over that job with a quarterback who clearly does not get it and does not take any accountability for his own failures? What a mess of an organization. And really, to me, it all starts with the owner, Stephen Ross. I know I said that Woody Johnson doesn't deserve all the blame. Look, Woody Johnson's had at least some success. Stephen Ross has had zero. From the day he bought the team, he looks as lost now as he's ever looked. So that's not going to change until he changes. They can change the coach, the quarterback, whatever. But, I mean, it's amazing that Tua would be this clueless. I don't know if he is clueless that this is what he was actually saying, throwing the coach under the bus, or whether he figured, you know what, let's throw the coach under the bus so I don't face as much criticism. Either way, it just shows you what a dysfunctional organization Miami is, and it's only a matter of time before there's changes. Certainly the coach is going to change. It remains to be seen whether Tua is going to join him out the door. After his comments on this, it would only be fitting.
Remember college? Well, now, college is over, and here comes your student loan debt. Is your private student loan debt keeping you up at night? You really need to talk to YRefi. YRefi refinances distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They can save you thousands of dollars and get you a custom payment that you can afford. And they don't care what your credit score is. Don't let private student loan debt ruin your life. Call YRefi today.
Okay, finally, a story from college football that has nothing to do with who's going to take over Penn State or the playoffs or realignment or anything like that. This is a story about a guy by the name of Tom Sillo. I don't know, maybe you've seen it. Tom Sillo is a freshman defensive lineman at Division III Lycoming College in Pennsylvania. And the reason why this has gotten such attention is because Tom is 58 years old. Yes, he is 58 years old. He is going back to school because he has always wanted to play college football. So he's not your average 58-year-old. He's not, hobbling around. He's a powerlifting champion. He owns the world record in deadlift, I think, in his age at like 580 pounds, which I would think is more than most college linemen can powerlift. So physically, he would seem to be kind of built for this. And it's been presented as this like inspirational, it's never too late to chase your dreams kind of things. I don't know. I read the stories on this and I think to myself, what are we doing? Like, it feels like there's a line between, yes, following your dreams and then just doing something that's ridiculous. Because to me, this is not the feel-good comeback tale of a 58-year-old guy playing college football. Like, what are we doing? I mean, if a 40-year-old wants to pitch in the Little League World Series, we're going to let him do that next? I mean, where did we draw the line? I mean, there's been enough of these stories lately that it does not feel like we need another one. Now, look, the guy he seems like a good dude. He's overcome addiction. He's turned around his life. That's why he didn't play college football when he was in that age range. So it's a happy story. And, I guess in some ways it is inspiring. But, I mean, it feels like this is more of something to gain attention. Because in 2025, there's no stories in college football that don't have something to do with the brand deal. So he actually has signed a brand deal as a 58-year-old. He signed an endorsement deal with his Aspercream. And that's for like sore joints. So look, in terms of the advertisement, that would make some sense. I get that. Okay, fine. And he told The Athletic, that he's living proof that you're never too old to chase your dreams. Yeah, I don't know, though. It just kind of feels kind of wrong to me. Like, isn't he kind of taking the spot of a kid who also wants to play college football, but yet is not 58 years old? And again, when you see the interviews and reasons, I don't want to hate the guy. Seems like a good dude. But it reminds me of that line from Jurassic Park, like you were so preoccupied whether or not you could do something that you didn't stop to think about whether or not you should do something. And that kind of feels like this one. Yes, technically you can play college football, I guess, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. And it almost feels like this is just chasing fame, you know. And nowadays, it feels like fame has never been more of a drug than it has. I mean, it's like its own reward. So this story's already kind of gone viral. Everybody's kind of written about it. I'm talking about it here. I'm sure that Netflix has got some documentary just around the corner. This is what I don't know. I don't know how the Tom Sillo story ends, but I think it's safe to say, given the landscape of college football, the way it is right now, the fact that people out there are just looking to do anything to gain attention, just because Tom Sillo is the 58-year-old right now, he's not going to be the last 58-year-old we hear about playing college football. I hope for his sake, though, it goes well. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Gordon Damer on Sports. We will be back next week with a fresh episode. Who knows? Maybe by then the Jets will have a win. If you've listened this long, if you've watched this long, please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button on whatever platform you are watching and listening on, and we'll be back next week with a fresh episode of Gordon Damer on